The Florida Straits, 0300 hours. The surface of the water is deceptively calm, but the air is vibrating with a low-frequency hum that can be felt in the marrow of your bones. This is the sound of 200,000 tons of nuclear-powered sovereign territory moving toward the Cuban coastline. To the observers in Havana, the horizon has disappeared. It has been replaced by a wall of steel that stretches from the Florida Keys to the Yucatan Channel. This is not a patrol. This is not a freedom of navigation exercise. This is the official launch of the United States Navy's Atlantic Strike Command. For decades, Cuba has relied on the island fortress strategy, assuming that the proximity to the American mainland and the complexity of its rugged terrain would make a direct intervention too costly. But in the year 2026, that math has been deleted. The United States Navy has just launched an invasion fleet so massive and so technologically advanced that the very concept of defense has become a punchline. Cuba is no longer looking at a blockade. They are looking at the end of their military history. To understand why this is different from anything seen in the last 80 years, we have to look at the composition of the fleet. Leading the charge is the USS Gerald R. Ford, hull number CVN-78. It is accompanied by two Nimitz-class carriers, providing a total of over 225 combat aircraft in a single concentrated area. But it is the amphibious ready group that is the real nightmare for Havana. The U.S. Navy has deployed 4 America-class amphibious assault ships. Each one of these is essentially a medium-sized aircraft carrier packed with F-35B Lightning II, stealth jets, and thousands of United States Marines. In total, the fleet consists of over 60 major surface combatants, including 24 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers equipped with the latest Aegis Baseline 10 combat system. The sheer density of firepower means that for every square mile of Cuban airspace, there are approximately 45 interceptor missiles ready to fire. The sarcastic expert says, Cuba spent years buying old Soviet surface-to-air missiles, but they forgot that you can't hit a ghost with a rusty hammer. While the ships are the visible threat, the United States Air Force has already won the war in the electromagnetic spectrum. Before the fleet even crossed the 24th parallel, a swarm of B-21 Raider stealth bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base. In the year 2026, these aircraft are the ultimate day-one weapons. They don't just drop bombs, they act as high-altitude electronic warfare nodes. Using their advanced sensors, they have mapped every single Cuban radar site and deactivated them using high-powered microwave pulses. This is the silent takeover. By the time the invasion fleet reached the 12-mile limit of Cuban territorial waters, the Cuban integrated air defense system was already functionally dead. The Cuban generals are looking at screens filled with static, trying to find a fleet that is right in front of them but invisible to their sensors. Cuba's defense strategy has always relied on the S-300 missile system and a network of coastal batteries. They believed these would force an American fleet to stay at least 200 miles away. However, the U.S. Navy is now using the Standard Missile 6 Block 1B. This is a hypersonic interceptor and strike missile that travels at speeds exceeding Mach 5. From the deck of a destroyer in the Florida Straits, an SM-6 can reach a target in Havana in less than 90 seconds. The U.S. Navy launched a coordinated saturation strike using these missiles. Because they travel so fast and have such a low radar profile, the Cuban interceptors never even left their launch tubes. The island fortress didn't fall after a long siege. Its walls were liquidated in the first 4 minutes of the engagement. The point of no return was officially crossed when the first wave of MV-22 Ospreys took off from the America-class ships. This isn't a traditional beach landing like D-Day in 1944. This is vertical envelopment. The Marines are bypassing the heavily defended beaches entirely. Using the speed and range of the Osprey and the CH-53K King Stallion, the U.S. is landing heavy armor and thousands of troops directly onto the key airfields in the Cuban interior. By taking the high ground and the logistics hubs first, the U.S. Navy has cut the Cuban military in half. The troops on the coast are now trapped between the massive fleet in the front and a fully equipped Marine Expeditionary Unit in the rear. It is a tactical checkmate. Let us talk about the attrition economy of this invasion. Cuba's total annual defense budget is approximately $500 million. The cost of just the Tomahawk missiles launched by the U.S. Navy in the first hour of this operation exceeds $800 million. The United States is spending more on the first hour of the war than Cuba spends on its entire military in a year. This is the reality of overwhelming force. Beijing and Moscow, Cuba's traditional allies, are silent. Why? Because they know the math. In the year 2026, the distance between a Tier 1 superpower and a regional power is no longer a gap. It is a canyon. The US Navy isn't just taking territory, they are proving that the cost of challenging American dominance in the Western Hemisphere is total military annihilation. The invasion fleet is being guided by the Maven Smart System. As we have discussed in previous deep dives, Maven is an artificial intelligence that processes millions of data points a second. In Cuba, Maven is being used to track the life pattern of every Cuban military vehicle. It knows where the tanks are hidden in the jungle and which tunnels are being used to move ammunition. Whenever a Cuban unit moves, an F-35B receives the coordinates automatically. There is no fog of war for the Americans. The AI has turned the island into a transparent grid. For the Cuban soldier, the war feels like being hunted by an invisible god that knows your every move before you even make it. While the carriers take the headlines, the US Navy's Ghost Fleet of unmanned surface vessels has completely sealed the island. These small, autonomous boats are equipped with sonar and torpedoes, and they have established a steel curtain around every Cuban port. No Cuban vessel can leave, and no foreign supply ship can enter. The Ghost Fleet operates on a decentralized network, meaning there is no mothership for the Cubans to attack. To break the blockade, Cuba would have to sink 500 individual drones that are each no larger than a jet ski. It is coastal denial on a scale never before seen. The invasion fleet has ensured that Cuba is not just an island, but an isolated prison. The sarcastic expert says, "You know you're in trouble when the ocean itself starts shooting back at you." By hour 6 of the invasion, the Cuban Central Command has been decapitated. This wasn't done with a bomb, but with cyberkinetic integration. The US Navy's 10th Fleet, the Cyber Command, has taken over the Cuban domestic power grid and communication networks. Every radio frequency is now broadcasting the US Navy's instructions for surrender. The Cuban generals cannot talk to their colonels. The colonels cannot find their soldiers. The invasion fleet didn't just break the Cuban military's bodies, it broke their brain. The point of no return is now in the rearview mirror. Even if the US Navy turned around right now, the Cuban military would take a decade to recover from the digital damage done in the first 6 hours. The US Navy's launch of the Atlantic Strike Command invasion fleet marks the end of the standoff era in the Caribbean. The sheer scale of the naval and air power deployed has proven that island fortresses are a myth in the age of hypersonics, stealth, and artificial intelligence. Cuba is doomed not because its soldiers aren't brave, but because they are fighting a 21st century god with 20th century tools. The invasion fleet is the ultimate manifestation of American power, a weapon so massive that it changes the map just by moving. If you want to stay updated on the tactical breakdown of the Havana landing and the secret role of the B-21 in the Caribbean, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We are tracking the deployment of the 3rd carrier group next week, and you won't want to miss the fallout of this historic operation. Thanks for watching, and remember, when the invasion fleet sails, the time for talking is over. It's time for the math to do the work.